All right, Colby Larson,
Hey, how you
it is
doing?
great to sit down and talk with you.
Thank you.
And this is kind of my first chance to have an opportunity to pick your brain. And I think our students at Sentient Academy are really interested and excited to hear from you. So just a little bit of background from what I understand. I got to know you through other gallery owners because they're pretty envious of what you're doing because you've been in the gallery business about 16 years, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, you have gone from not only a gallery owner, but you own 5 galleries here in Park City.
Yep.
I mean, that's an incredible feat. I don't know, even though I've been in the business for 20 plus years, I only know a handful of people like you that actually have not only done one gallery well, but to actually expand into other locations. Yeah. And so, and each one of your locations is different. It's got its own unique flavor to it, which is really impressive to manage all of them like that. Now, for the students to know that kind of the area you're in. So Park City is and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a mountain town. Skiing is second to none, right? People come all over the world here to ski. There's also the Sundance Film Festival, so you get celebrities coming here as well. So it's a kind of a high-end area for clients to come. But you get to see people from all over the world, right?
Yeah.
That come to your door.
Yeah.
Which is pretty neat. So you have not only it's not a local experience you're kind of having an international experience. Is that right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we want to hear a little bit more, maybe a little bit about your origin story and just how you got into the business, because you can't really necessarily get a degree in gallery ownership, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit of entrepreneur, a lot of entrepreneur part of it, right? And so I want to hear a little bit about that, and also some of these insights. How have you been able to step in to an area where a lot of people have struggled to make a business, and also for artists, young artists that are maybe wanting to get into galleries, some thoughts and things that you have on how to do that. So we'll just first start. Let's I want to hear a little bit about you and your story and kind of how things started to build.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I've always had some type of sales job growing up, and I've always had and played with the sale of art. But then my background in the arts in general comes from my mom and dad. And my mother, she's an educator. She taught at UVA, and while we lived back east, we'd visit just all the museums multiple times. My dad's an architect designer, so I was exposed to the arts in that side as well. And that exposure to art, I would never have known that it would be being utilized like this later on down the road. And when I was in school, I was artistic, and I won a little contest here and there. And people ask me often, well, are you an artist as well? And I joke around and reply, the art of sales is my thing. But photography is something that I love and enjoy. And people are like, well, why don't you sell your art? And I'm like, well, it's like my hobby. It's like my thing that I really enjoy. And I kind of separate those two and whatnot. And when I went to school, I started out and I was like, these big ambitions, not to be an artist or a successful artist or anything like that. And I wanted to be a dentist. I wanted to, go into business. And when I was in school, I loved economics. And so I went to the economics route. So I have my degrees in economics. You put a mathematical equation in front of me, like math for economics, aced it. Statistics for economics, aced it. I love math. And then I worked at a bank for 4 years, loved banking, and I wanted to go to Wall Street. And I wanted to work at a hedge fund company, and numbers was my thing. And I had, during school, I had got my real estate license as well. And all of this is little tiny details that are super important later on down the road. And when I got done, my sister, who went to the Laguna Beach College of Art and Design, she was there. She finished school, moved back here, and was working at a gallery here in Park City. And she was dating a guy that owned an art gallery, and she said, Cole, just come and work at his gallery and sell art for him just for 2 months, enjoy life, snowboard, have a good time. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, what the heck? I'm just going to go do it. Mm-hmm. And then I was also at that same time there was a cool connection between a hedge fund company in Salt Lake City. It was one of the first hedge fund companies in Salt Lake. And I had the opportunity to start kind of doing an internship with them. And I was working on my Series 7 and starting the gallery at the same time. Turns out he was also buying art from that gallery too. So there's another cool connection that we like made there. And one day, this is probably 3 months later, I showed up there to work on the Series 7, and there's full on FBI jackets. There's like, it was full on being shut down. Like, it was crazy. I was like, what is happening right now? And I was like, all right. Yeah. So that didn't work out there. So I stayed at the gallery. The more and more I stayed there, I outsold everybody that was there by like 5 times. And I just really enjoyed it. And where I grew up.
So even just from the get-go, you just had this kind of knack for it, right?
I did. And maybe the fact that I wasn't there to sell as a career, but it was like the stress of it was just, I just kind of rolled with it. My friends would make fun of me and be like, what do you do and sell art? I was like, yeah. And they're like, what do you do exactly? And I was like, I'm like a professional storyteller. Like, that's what I do. I go and tell stories. I talk about the art and people connect with it. And I will say, and we totally touch base on this later, is that I was too young to know what I was really connecting with and enjoyed, and why I was successful with it, is that it was the people, 100%. And there's this magic moments where people come into the gallery, they're on vacation, they're not seeking out art galleries necessarily. So they're not coming into the gallery saying, hey, honey, let's go out to art galleries today. And they'd come in and just communicating with them, breaking down walls of me talking to them. They know I'm a salesman. And as we connect and talk about art and just being in tune enough for them to know, hey, I like this. Maybe the husband doesn't like it, but sees the wife likes it. And subconsciously, they're speaking to themselves, but sometimes people don't know why they're connecting with art. And so I just kind of know and feel that and kind of go through it. And when people are buying something as a couple, especially if some of these couples are high performers, it's a really cool experience that I get, because most people in their industries, let's say that he's the CEO of this big company, like, how often is his wife around? Or vice versa, she's a big CEO of the company, and how often is her husband around that people can see them together? But there's always a great spouse to make a great couple, to make that's there with the high performer. So there's this cool experience for me that they're presenting, in a weird way to say it, their best self, because they're together, they're connecting with something together, but they're also buying something. So they kind of pull to you to present a better, like, their best self. And in that little moments, like, there are so many walls broken down, and I have no idea who they are. And a lot of times they know that I have no idea who they are. And I'm communicating with this multi-millionaire a full hour. And like, how much money would someone spend to spend an hour with that person for 1 hour? Would it be $10,000, $30,000? I don't know. Or even if they're not like an incredibly wealthy person, but those moments together is so magical. And me connecting with people and that enjoyment is really what I was like falling in love with. It was so much fun. And it's a little, for me, I would say 16 years now into it, I would say that realization didn't pop in till like 5 years ago, that I really was like, this is really what's happening. And people are buying art because of an experience that they're having.
Experience together as a couple.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And then as I worked at that gallery, there was another gallery that saw that I was good at selling, and that gallery approached me and said, hey, we'd love for you to come work for us. And it was here in Park City. And I was like, well, yeah. And they offered me a phenomenal salary, an override of another gallery that they had, and then asked me to then open other galleries with them. And so we opened one in Lahaina, and then they had me and my wife move up to Jackson
Hole. So they put the money up, and then you ran the gallery. That was your role. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was kind of a partnership in a way, or were you kind of did you see yourself, you were a manager at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of the gallery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Director would be like
Director. Yeah. Right.
And then it would be managing the other locations. And then there was an
Right.
override. There was no like legal like partnership. There was just an override. So whatever Lahaina was selling, there's money that I'd make in the Vail Gallery, and then in Jackson, and then here. And then when we moved to Jackson, it was really great. The guy that I worked for had an interesting background, that he was an artist, but his degree was in accounting. And so he and I connected on so many levels. It's like, I'm great with numbers. And so when I went to work for him, I was like, I love this industry. I want to be in this industry. And so he also approached things with me in that sense. Like, he saw the intrigue with the numbers and things like that. And so when we were in Jackson, he also just like dropped us off, and it's like, all right, drove up with the U-Haul, and then just like was gone. And so like
took the art up there, and he was out. So you were doing it. You had to figure it all out, and
which is really cool, because like I got so much training there so quickly from the first gallery I was at, that I was salesman, but also I do all their shipping for them. So I'd come in early on shifts, and I'd do all the shipping, and if things were coming in, I was unpacking, I'd hang the walls, I'd tweak the lighting, and you know, as a young kid, just doing the hustle, making sure that like, you know, come in early, make sure the lights are done, taking out the trash, vacuuming, and doing everything, to then moving to Jackson, to where like, okay, now we're hiring people, meeting with the city, the sales tax, all of that. Yeah. And so when the economy tanked, 2010, me and my wife wanted to move back to Park City. Our families were here. We had a little one, and at that time she was now about 1.5. And we're like really pulling to want to come back, but we also wanted to just do our own thing. And so that's when we opened a gallery here.
In 2010.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, because there were so many galleries closing at that time, right?
Yeah.
I know, like in Carmel alone, you know, there's 100 and something galleries there, and almost half of them closed during the kind of the 2008, 2010 period. I mean, it was tough for gallery stuff. So that's amazing that, you know, that's when you go in and start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's at that point, these are like such little details that we like. If I'm being long-winded, just tell me. When a month or two before I left Jackson to move back, my wife, we moved everything back, and I just slept in the gallery up there, and
really,
and just to finish out the season up there. But when we had come back here, there was 11 spaces on Main Street here available.
11, wow.
Yeah, because not only galleries were closing.
And just to mention that, like Main Street is usually just packed to the teeth, right? And you know, that just shows the times.
Yeah, totally.
What they were like back
in
that time, right?
Yeah. And random side tangent.
Yeah.
During that time, there was one art gallery carrying like fine art, painting, that closed. There was 3 photo galleries that closed. And then across the board, if you look at the country and how many like galleries were closing, so many photo galleries were closed, which is just interesting, because the photo galleries will normally it's the photographer's art gallery. It's just an interesting random. And since that time in 2010, there's been 2, if not 3 other photo galleries that have opened here on Main Street and then closed.
Interesting.
I don't know why that's interesting to me, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I went to every single location. 10 of them said no. And literally the last one where Old Town Gallery is, it was like a desperation, like approached the building owner differently. I was like, okay, man, so here's the story. And you're kind of like my last shot. Here's like everything in a nutshell. And everyone looked at me as like this young kid that was like...
Yeah, so how old were you at this time, if you don't mind me asking?
I want to say I'm 38 right now, so I would have been 28, 27
wow.
and a half, 28.
Yeah.
Yeah, October.
You know, in this business, you don't see a lot of younger people, especially in their 20s, opening up a gallery.
Yeah.
Right?
And the guy chuckled, and he's like, He's like, your story is so much like mine. And he said, the ski shop that's below us, he's like, that's one of 6 here. but I own others in Vail and Aspen, and your story is exactly like mine. And he's like, it'll work out, and I know it will. And he's like, let's do it. And he's a cool guy. He's a huge part of like the success of the gallery.
Mm-hmm.
Just like believing in me in that sense. And there's also a couple of artists too that knew that things would work out really well. And
artists that were going to come with you and do this venture together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was one artist that I still carry him, and he's still like one of our number one selling artists. And every time I'd sell a painting for 5 times in a row, and his paintings are like 12 grand,
Mm-hmm.
sell it and like stoked, happy, about to send him a check. He's like, cold, put it back into the company. And I was like, I give myself like chills and stuff because I was like, he's a stud. So it was really cool that he had that vibe and just
Mm-hmm.
knew that like we were in it together almost.
Yeah.
It was really neat.
Right.
Yeah. And then in opening multiple galleries, it hasn't happened in the sense that it's like, hey, let's open 5 galleries and let's try and get 10. Nothing like that. When I'd opened Old Town, it was a gallery that was a lot of color, and it was a gallery that really connected with people in San Diego and Florida, and that's just where we'd ship stuff. So I wasn't connecting with Park City
So
people.
even though you're here in Park City, there are people from the West Coast coming and then taking something home back there, or are they putting it in a house here? Because I know there's a lot of second homeowners.
Yeah,
here.
so that's like half the business is like the locals here. The other half is shipping.
Yeah.
And sending it off, and I was only tapping into that. So like half the revenue that I was used to,
Right.
I wasn't hitting it. I was like, ugh, but the gallery was tiny. It was only like 1,100 square feet.
Yeah.
And so I was like, we really need to open a gallery that connects with Park City. And so that's where I opened Park City Fine Art. And that was just right across the street. And it was convenient too, because I could just go back and forth between them.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost more like an office space that had 2 cubicles, even though
Sure.
they're 2 totally different names.
So were
totally
you
different
running both
genre.
of them at that time, or did you have somebody else?
I had one other employee,
Uh-huh.
and then, I would come in like, she'd come in working an 8-hour shift. I would come in earlier, schedule her later so that we'd overlap. And then if I opened and she didn't come in till 1, I'd just sit in Old Town and maybe look across the street and just keep the door open. See if like,
right.
yeah. And during the high season, I'd bring on another person,
yeah.
and I was able to handle it.
And so the high season is, what is it, November to February?
Yeah, so back then it was. Now, about 3 years ago, it's changed a lot here in Park City, where it's really a all year round location. So
yeah, it's a destination. So I mean, it's the largest. Park City is the largest ski resort in the United States.
Yeah.
Right. So it attracts people, both summer events. They had the Winter Olympics here.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so fun.
That's nice that it's because I know that's one thing with the artists that sell in ski resorts around the United States. There's that ski season. That's nice to hear that it's actually extended throughout the year.
Yeah.
Here in Park City.
Yeah. Even what's a couple nice things, pros and cons. I mean, when there was a slow time, it was a great time to follow up with clients and really take time to, really curate what's coming into the gallery, and you could constantly just know like what your people may be interested in collecting, and that's a fun part of the business that we don't get to play with as much because it's more and more year round, to where it's like there's always new clientele coming in. But back then it was the need for the follow-up was a huge part of the success of the gallery. And
develop. So would you say that's kind of developing those deeper relationships than somebody just coming, buying something, then going off?
Yeah.
Would you do a cold call, or not a cold call in this case, but would you do a follow-up phone call, or was it more like an email kind of thing that you would do?
Yeah, so right now, like that's one thing with the staff that we talk about is okay, you sold something, cool. Now, what are you going to do from there forward? Are you going to follow up with them? How are you going to do it? And today I see it more and more that the staff wants to just email and that's it. They don't want to hear. The people connect with you, and to read and feel someone through the internet and typing, it is hard, man. And if you pick up the phone and make a phone call, and they hear your voice and hear the excitement and the art, and actually they hear your voice, actually you care about them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, how's it going? How's your kids? How's your wife? How's the painting look on the wall? Like, they can feel that. You can't do that through that typing. And so, an email to say, hey, how's it going? And then always to say, hey, I'll follow up with a phone call. And for us, it's if we get a voicemail, I love a voicemail because one, they saw you called. Two, you leaving a voicemail where they hear your voice, and now they have a reminder that they need to call you. It's almost like you're hitting them 3 times rather than an email. So it's kind of a nice way if you get a voicemail, because then they can listen to it again too, and you're there. You're present.
Yeah. Now, do you remember? There's so many relationships, right, that you develop over the years, and I myself, it's hard to keep track of everybody, right? Do you take notes or anything like that, or do you good memory to remember the conversations and things like that, or?
So yes, there is. So in my phone, everybody has a nickname. It's how I do it, and it's always awkward when the client's right there and they see what their nickname is.
Yeah.
And I'm big with nicknames.
Yeah. I always add a thing. Yeah, that's interesting that you do that. You have to, right, to jog your memory.
Mm-hmm. We have a system that we use, and when we write up a sale, there's transaction notes and then notes. And we'll always put down the notes in there. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people that visit, it's the same month every year. And so if a month's coming up, like right now, March, I pulled up last year's sales in March and just kind of glanced down the list. I'm like, yeah, I think they mentioned that they'd come in. And I pull up and see, oh yeah, they are going to come in this month. And like, oh yeah, I saw that they really liked that artist and this artist. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I'll put down birthdays in there and just follow up. There was a sales consultant that is, to date, like she's amazing, like incredible, Barbara. And she worked at that first gallery, and she had her own filing cabinet. It was a big stack for it, and she would have files, and the gallery would have logbooks where you'd log the people. And she'd have this file, and she would print the emails that she sent to people, and then she would staple it, or if they bought something, she'd staple information. And she had this file by month and by year, and she would go back and reference it. And she honestly could never have even come back into the gallery again, and just sat in her house and just gone through her files and notes and emailed people. If she knew a painting come in, she would just kick butt at it, because she kept such good, meticulous records of people and what they like, what they do. People, they buy and sell homes, and she find out about it, and then, hey, what walls do you need? And photoshopping is a huge thing that we use in the gallery, where we find out, like, hey, there's a space, or maybe we'll write down, like, hey, they're building a home and it's not going to be done for a year and a half. We keep notes and then put a reminder. We use a calendar where you can set reminders, and all of a sudden you see a reminder of someone that you talked to a year and a half ago, and you're like, oh my gosh. So like, having the long vision is so important in this game. And if you don't have the long vision and you're going month in, month out, like, you're going to struggle. There's always going to be months where, like, the economy dips, or for some reason the traffic isn't coming through. And if you don't have a pipeline that can constantly be fed, and that pipeline can come from 30 different sources, and you have to play all 30 at a given point in time. Yeah.